is Dr. Purnima. Today I am discussing about the evaluation of a case of proptosis under the guidance of Dr. P. Padmavati ma'am and the chairperson Dr. P. Modini ma'am.
Before evaluating a proptosis case, one should have thorough knowledge about the anatomy of the orbit. The picture is showing the anatomy of the right orbit. It consists of four walls: the medial wall, the roof, the lateral wall, and the floor. The medial wall is formed by the lacrimal bone laterally and the ethmoid bone medially. Behind it there is ethmoid sinus. So any infection of the ethmoid sinus like sinusitis may invade the orbit and causes orbital cellulitis. So in every case of orbital cellulitis, one should look for paranasal sinus infection so that we can treat it accordingly. Coming to the roof, it is made up of the frontal bone anteriorly and the lesser wing of the sphenoid posteriorly. Here the frontoethmoid suture is important because while doing surgeries, dissection beyond this level leads to exposure of the dura of the frontal lobe and leads to CSF leakage. Superolaterally, it consists of a fossa for the lacrimal gland. So any infections of the lacrimal gland like dacryoadenitis or neoplasms like pleomorphic adenoma pushes the globe downwards and inwards. Laterally, the wall is made up of the zygomatic bone and the greater wing of the sphenoid posteriorly. Laterally, anterior half of the globe is not covered by bone. So, palpation of retrobulbar tumors is easier from lateral side rather than from the nasal side. Now coming into the floor of the orbit, it is made up of the maxillary bone anteriorly and the palatine bone posteriorly. As you all know, the floor is commonly involved in blowout fractures, and also any lesions of the maxillary sinus like neoplasia, fungal granuloma may push the globe upwards. So these are some of the anatomical aspects, applied anatomical aspects with respect to the proptosis. The anatomy of the orbit is very important in localizing the lesion. Now coming into the surgical spaces of the orbit, there are four surgical spaces. First one is a subperiosteal space between the bone and the periorbita. Any lesions here, because of this presence of the periorbita, it acts as a barrier against the spread of any infections and tumors towards the eye. Now coming to the peripheral space, also known as peribulbar space, is the space between the periorbita and the extraocular muscles anteriorly, and posteriorly it continues with the central space. Usually the lesions in the space produces eccentric proptosis, and anesthesia before cataract surgery also will be given here as peribulbar block. Now coming into the central space, also known as muscular cone or posterior space or retrobulbar space, bounded anteriorly by the Tenon's capsule, peripherally by the extraocular muscles, posteriorly it continues with the peripheral surgical space. The contents are optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, abducent nerve, ophthalmic artery and superior ophthalmic vein, and also central orbital fat. Usually the lesions in the central space produces axial proptosis, but not always, because large intracorneal lesions grows into the peripheral surgical space and produces eccentricity in an otherwise axial proptosis. Coming to the subtenon space between the sclera and the Tenon's capsule is the subtenon's space. Now objective of evaluation of a case of proptosis is to determine the probable etiology and plan the management accordingly. So what is proptosis? It is the forward protrusion of the globe with respect to the orbit. Usually the distance between the lateral orbital rim and the apical cornea is about 18 to 21 mm. If it is greater than 21 mm or the asymmetry of 2 mm between the two eyes is said to be the proptosis. Now algorithm for approach to a case of proptosis. We should see the thorough history, ocular and systemic examination, specific examination of the proptosis, diagnosis, imaging and investigations, and confirmation by histopathology, and management according to the final diagnosis, and also the monitoring the course of the disease is important here. In evaluation of a proptosis case, we should see the following 9 P's: pain, progression, proptosis, pulsations, prism bar cover test, perception of color, pupil, periorbital changes, and palpation. Now coming to the pain, pain is seen in certain infections and inflammatory disorders like orbital cellulitis, abscess, myosisticercosis, and idiopathic orbital inflammatory syndrome, like this. Sometimes retinoblastoma and rhabdomyosarcoma can also present as painful proptosis mimicking orbital cellulitis. And the malignant lesions which erode the bone also produces pain, which is dull boring type of pain. This is a case of orbital abscess. You can see here the discharge and the congestion and chemosis of the conjunctiva and the forward protrusion of the globe. In these cases, we should ask thoroughly about the sinus infections, so that we should rule out the source of infections in these cases. Now, this is a case of myosisticercosis. This is a component of ptosis, proptosis. You can see the inflammatory response, periocular inflammatory response. And as I already told you, certain malignant conditions like retinoblastoma and rhabdomyosarcoma, which mimic the orbital cellulitis. So in a child with proptosis mimicking orbital cellulitis, we should rule out the retinoblastoma and rhabdomyosarcoma. The down picture showing the proptosed eye with eyelid retraction, the congestion of the conjunctiva, chemosis. This is the acute inflammatory stage of the thyroid orbitopathy. See, you can see the lid retraction and chemosis of the conjunctiva. Now, trauma also produces proptosis because of three main reasons. First one is the retrobulbar hemorrhage. Next one is the rupture of the sinus may produce escape of the air and produces emphysema. This can lead to proptosis. And lastly, keratoco-cavernous fistula. It leads to pulsatile. Now coming to the progression. In this progression, we should see whether the proptosis is acute or subacute or chronic. Acute is hours to weeks. Subacute means 1 week to 4 weeks. Chronic is greater than 1 month. So what are the causes of acute proptosis in trauma? Trauma is a main cause. First we should rule out the history of trauma. The infections, inflammatory disorders, and certain metastatic lesions also produces as acute proptosis. Chronic. The causes of chronic proptosis are thyroid associated orbitopathy is the most important cause, orbital varices, lymphangioma, optic nerve glioma, neurofibroma, schwannoma. On examining a case of proptosis, the causes of pseudoproptosis should be ruled out. The causes of pseudoproptosis are ipsilateral eyelid retraction, contralateral ptosis, and ipsilateral ophthalmos. You can see here the left eye appearing as proptotic eye because of this eyelid retraction. Normally, the upper eyelid covers the upper 2 mm of the cornea. See, in this case, it is not covering the upper 2 mm of the cornea. The eyelid is retracted. So, it is a case of eyelid retraction mimicking the proptosis. So, it can be called as pseudoproptosis. See, in this case, you can see the right eye is appearing as proptosis because of left eye ptosis. See here the left eye upper eyelid is covering more than 2 mm of the cornea. So it is a case of ptosis mimicking the other eye as proptosis. This is a case of ophthalmos. There is no forward protrusion of the globe, just enlargement of the globe. So ipsilateral ophthalmos also mimics proptosis. These are all should be ruled out in evaluating a case of proptosis. There are two types of proptosis, axial and eccentric proptosis. Axial proptosis is the forward protrusion of the globe. Mostly the intraconal lesions causes this, and the lesions in the peripheral surgical space pushes the globe to the opposite side and produces eccentric proptosis. The most common causes of axial proptosis are the intraconal lesions, obviously. In that, the most common cause is the cavernous hemangioma, schwannoma, neurofibroma. And the most common intraconal cystic lesion is the hydatid cyst. And also optic nerve glioma and optic nerve meningioma are also important but not common. This is a case of axial proptosis. There is only forward protrusion of the globe, no vertical or horizontal displacement. You can see here the eyelid retraction also, and the congestion of the conjunctiva and the staring look of the patient. This is a typical case of thyroid orbitopathy. So axial proptosis, most common causes are the thyroid orbitopathy and some of the intraconal lesions. These intraconal lesions may compress the optic nerve and leads to the visual loss. So visual loss in a case of axial proptosis, we should think of the compressive lesions which is compressing the optic nerve, and also the lesions from the optic nerve itself like optic nerve glioma and optic nerve meningioma. And the second picture is a case of eccentric proptosis. See, the eyeball is pushed outwards and downwards. So what are the lesions that causes the outward and downward displacement? The lesions in the superomedial place. So what are the anatomical structures in the superomedial space means the frontal sinus, the ethmoid sinus. So the pathology of these causes the downward and outward displacement of the globe. So what is the pathology? Frontoethmoidal lesions, fungal granuloma of ethmoid sinus, fibrous dysplasia of frontal bone, and superomedial dermoid and hemangioma, and osteoma of the ethmoid. It is rare. Among these, frontoethmoidal lesions are the most common. See the same picture, the CT scan showing the huge frontoethmoidal mucosal which is pushing the eyeball out and so now coming to the down and in proptosis, the most common lesion of down and in is the dacryoadenitis. See the female, this is 32-year-old female presenting with the proptosis of the right eye which with the lesion here which is pushing the eyeball inwards. See the globe is pushed down and in and the fullness in the lacrimal gland region. CT shows a well encapsulated mass of the lacrimal gland. See the surrounding bone was absolutely normal. This is the case of pleomorphic adenoma. Now displacement. As I already told you, the upward displacement is mainly due to extension of the lesion from the maxillary sinus such as neoplasia, fungal dermoid and dumbbell dermoid. See here the child presenting with the proptosis of the right eye since 2 years. See note the fullness of the cheek here and the gross upward displacement of the globe because of the lesion in the maxillary sinus. See here the CT scan showing the ossifying fibroma. Note the mass is involving the nasal cavity and the oral cavity also. Sometimes the cystic lesions like myocystic that extend into the inferior rectus muscle also produces upward displacement of the globe. So measurement of proptosis. Proptosis can be measured in all three directions: anteroposterior, horizontal and vertical directions. So axial proptosis can be best measured by Hertel's exophthalmometer or Lutz exophthalmometer. So now coming to the Hertel's exophthalmometer. This is a picture showing the Hertel's exophthalmometer of our oculoplasty department. It consists of two foot plate. The right one is the fixed foot plate and the left one is the sliding foot plate, and it also consists of the viewing mirror and the scale inside it. And the distance between the two foot plates here reading is there, that is called as base reading. It is very important to record the base reading since exophthalmometry values change with base reading. For example, if you take two readings on the same patients with different base readings, the values you'll get will be different. So if you forgot to note base reading, you can't compare results accurately over a period of time. So that when once base reading is recorded at a time, subsequent readings should be taken with the same base reading. While using Hertels, the patient is asked to look straight ahead and the eyes are kept at the level of examiner's eye. Rest the fixed foot plate on the lateral wall of the right orbit and the other foot plate, slide it till it rests on the lateral wall of the left orbit. So shine a torch at the glabella, close the unexamined eye with thumb so that we can get the primary position of the examining eye. Now the millimeter mark coinciding with the image of the corneal apex is noted along with the baseline reading of the crossbar. Now the measurement of horizontal and vertical display. Ask the patient to look straight ahead at a distant object in the straight gaze. Cover the unexamined eye and use a scale and measure the distance from the center point of the reference root of the nose to the nasal limbus. So compare this distance from that of the other eye. Lesser reading of the proptosed eye means that the globe was pushed medially, and greater reading of the proptosed eye means that the globe was pushed laterally. And the vertical displacement is measured by using two transparent scales. One scale should be present at the level of the glabella or the eyebrow, and measure the distance from this scale to the level of the corneal reflex. This is the measurement for vertical displacement. Now the bedside measurement of proptosis by Nafziger's test. In this test, stand behind the patient, tilt the head backwards and look down the patient's forehead. The proptosed eye appears ahead of the other. In this picture, you can note the prominence of the left eye, that is, it is the proptosed eye, whereas the right eye is not visible here. Another simple bedside test is with the transparent scale. Ask the patient to gently close the eyes and keep a transparent scale across the eye in contact with the forehead and the cheek. Normally, there will be a space between the scale and the closed lid, but in the presence of proptosis, there is no space. You can see the obliteration of the space here. The scale is in contact with the eyelid of the proptosed eye. Now coming to the pulsations, there are two types: the pulsations from the vascular area and the transmitted from the cerebral pulsations due to bony deficiency. Now you can see the pulsatile proptosis of the left eye. To detect the pulsations, observe from a side. See how it is rhythmically pulsating, and subtle pulsations can be recognized while recording IOP with an applanation tonometer. Causes of vascular pulsations are: first one is the keratico-cavernous fistula, meningioma, orbital varices, aneurysms. The first picture is showing a case presented with pulsatile proptosis since his childhood. Note, see, the tumor is involving both the upper lids of the left eye, and there is also a temporal fullness, and has also lesion nodules which is suggestive of neurofibroma. And coming to the CT, see, there is a defect in the roof of the orbit, which explains the transmitted pulsations of the cerebral pulsations, which results in pulsatile proptosis. And the down picture is a child presented with pulsatile proptosis following trauma. Why? Because there is a fracture of the roof of the orbit. Through that fracture, the frontal lobe herniated, and the pulsations of the frontal lobe are the reason for the pulsatile proptosis of the child. Examine the pupil for the presence of any relative afferent pupillary defect because it indicates that optic nerve is being damaged. So this is a video demonstrating the relative afferent pupillary defect. Normally when a light is thrown into the eye, the pupil have to constrict. But when there is any relative afferent pupillary defect, it dilates. I'll show you this. The light is thrown into the left eye, it is constricting, so it is normal, and into the right eye the pupil is not constricting, it is dilating. So in this case there is relative afferent pupillary defect of the right eye. So the presence of relative afferent pupillary defect indicates that optic nerve is being damaged. Optic nerve can be damaged due to three main reasons: due to compression, due to any space occupying lesion of the central space, or due to enlarged extraocular muscles as in the case of thyroid associated orbitopathy, or the tumors of the optic nerve or its sheet itself like optic nerve glioma and optic nerve meningioma. Due to narrowing of the orbital space at the apex, a smaller lesion at the orbital apex can lead to optic nerve compression. Optic nerve damage is also seen in severe stretching of the optic nerve as seen by tenting of the posterior pole on the CT scan. PBCT, that is the prism bar cover test. This demonstrates the ocular motility. So in thyroid associated orbitopathy there is restrictive pathology involving the muscles which limits the ocular motility. This can be demonstrated by prism bar cover test. In thyroid orbitopathy, the sequence of involvement of muscles are inferior rectus, medial rectus, superior rectus and lateral rectus. In this order the muscles will involve. And the other causes which causes the limitation of ocular motility are idiopathic orbital inflammation of myositis component, myocystis and fungal granuloma. Another important cause is the keratoconus fistula, wherein the restriction is paralytic in nature. Large mass lesions can cause mechanical restriction. When ocular motility is limited, do FDT, that is forced reduction test, also known as forced traction test, and differential tonometry to know whether it is due to restrictive pathology or paralytic pathology. In restrictive pathology, the FDT is positive and you feel the resistance when you try to move the globe in the direction of limitation. Now I'll demonstrate the video of force reduction test. This is a video demonstrating the force reduction test. It is the most useful test for diagnosing the presence of mechanical restriction of ocular motility. So in this case the eyeball is deviated medially. So it may be because of two reasons: due to paralysis of the lateral rectus muscle or due to any mechanical restriction of the medial rectus muscle. To differentiate between the mechanical restriction and the paralysis, we have to do this force reduction test. So after anesthetizing the eye conjunctiva with topical anesthetic drops, hold the conjunctiva near the limbus with two toothed forceps and move the eye passively in the direction of limitation. Here in this case, move the eye passively into abduction. If no resistance is encountered, the motility defect is clearly caused by paralysis of the lateral rectus muscle. If resistance is encountered, mechanical restrictions do exist medially, and there may be contracture of the medial rectus muscle or myositis of the medial rectus muscle, something that is mechanically causing the limitation of ocular motility. Differential tonometry, elevation of intraocular pressure by more than 5 millimeters of mercury from the base pressure when the patient attempts to move the globe in the direction of limitation of movement is significant. This occurs in restrictive pathology as the globe is compressed between the constricting muscle and its opponent, which cannot relax. Quantify the motility restriction with prism bar cover test in different directions. This helps to know what is actually happening to the extraocular muscles, especially when you have to follow a patient for a long time, like thyroid associated orbitopathy and to decide if the patient benefits with prescription of prisms. Periorbital changes are inspectory findings. This helps in understanding the pathology of the lesion and aid in clinical diagnosis. The most important are the lid retraction is the most common periorbital change in thyroid associated orbitopathy. Salmon patch, this is a characteristic of lymphoma. Temporal fullness of the sphenoid wing meningioma. Coming to fullness, temporal fullness, this is a very characteristic of sphenoid wing meningioma. Sphenoid wing meningioma of the lateral half typically presents as proptosis with fullness of the temple, which often exhibits pulsations. Sphenoid wing meningioma of medial half presents as proptosis with restricted ocular motility. Another cause of temporal fullness is a dumbbell dermoid in which eyeball can move forwards on mastication due to contraction of the temporalis muscle. This is a case showing the medial displacement of the globe and fullness of the temple region. So the CT scan shows there is a big defect in the lateral wall of the orbit and there is a dermoid which is extending into the temporal region. So this is a case of dumbbell dermoid in which the globe moves forwards on mastication due to contraction of the temporalis muscle. Lid changes. The important lid changes include lid retraction, lid lag, sinus lid margin. Tumors of the lid, primary malignant tumors of the lid with secondary orbital extension, primary vascular neoplasia with components of orbit and lid, or multiple tumors involving the lid and the orbit like neurofibromatosis, like von Recklinghausen syndrome. Lid retraction is the most common lid change seen in thyroid associated orbitopathy. These are the different grades of lid retraction. It is measured by recording marginal reflex distance values. Marginal reflex distance is the distance between the upper lid margin and the corneal reflex. See, this is the upper lid margin and the corneal reflex. This is the MRD, that is marginal reflex distance, and subtracting the normal values from it. So the reasons for the lid retraction in thyroid associated orbitopathy are due to overaction of the sympathetic system that leads to contraction of the Muller's muscle and due to fibrosis of the levator palpebrae superioris muscle. These are different grades: the mild lid retraction, moderate and severe. The mild is if the lid margin is at the level of the limbus, it is mild. If the lid margin is up to 4 mm of the sclera, that is if the 4 mm of the sclera is seen, that is moderate. If greater than 4 mm of the sclera is seen, that is severe lid retraction. Now coming to the lid lag and lag of thymus. It is very important to differentiate between these two. Lid lag is when the upper lid does not follow the eye on down gauge. Lag of thymus is inability to close the eyes completely. It is the lag of thymus. This is a video demonstrating the lid lag. You can see the upper eyelid of the right eye is not following the eye on the down gauge. This is the lid lag. This is a video demonstrating lag of thymus. It is the inability to close the eyes completely. You can see here. This is a picture showing lag of thymus. It is a very important finding to look for because it can lead to exposure keratopathy, frank corneal ulcer and even perforation. Hence it is important to detect early lag of thymus to take remedial measures. See, normally the patient is appearing normal, there is no lag of thymus, but when examined from below there is a mild lag of thymus here. So to detect early lag of thymus, look from below. And severe lag of thymus is usually seen in very gross proptosis, which can be due to very large benign tumor, but more often due to faster growing lesions like metastatic lesions. Coming to the mass, Look at the details of any visible mass like its location, surface, look for any vasculature, transillumination, posterior extent of the borders, and also measure the size of the mass lesion. Sometimes there can be more than one mass lesion as in von Recklinghausen disease. Conjunctival changes are the Salmon patch, chemosis, caput medusae, subconjunctival hemorrhage. Occasionally, tumor components may be visible. Coming to the Salmon patch, it is a pinkish smooth mass typically seen in the subconjunctival plane either at the limbus or the fornix. It is very typical of lymphoma. The lesion at the fornix, which is more commonly seen, is due to the extension of the tumor as it mounts to the adjacent globe and extends anteriorly along the subtenon's plane and can extend up to the limbus. The isolated limbal mass is due to proliferation of the lymphocytes. This is the Salmon cap. These are the engorged blood vessels typically around the limbus, seen in AV malformations or keratico-cavernous fistula. The engorgement is usually due to increased venous pressure due to AV communication. It can be very subtle and can be easily overlooked. In high flow fistulas, the caput medusae can be very significant and point towards the diagnosis. Sometimes it can be associated with chemosis of the conjunctiva. Now, the chemosis of the conjunctiva is 3 grades. The first grade is when the chemosed conjunctiva extends up to half of the lower lid margin. Grade 1. Grade 2 is when it covers the entire lid margin. And grade 3 is when it overhangs the lid margin. Chemosis can be because of active infections and inflammations like orbital cellulitis, orbital abscess, thyroid orbitopathy, or due to high flow arteriovenous communications and lymphangiectasia. Coming to the subconjunctival hemorrhage is an important feature of trauma, leukemia, bleeding diastasis. In a case of trauma, apart from associated ocular and systemic injuries, look for RAPD, that is relative afferent pupillary defect, retrobulbar hemorrhage in a case of proptosis, and orbital fractures. Valsalva. Increase in proptosis after Valsalva maneuver is typically due to orbital varings. How to perform this Valsalva maneuver? Ask the patient to comfortably sit down or lie down. Ask the patient to take a deep breath and hold it, and pinch the nose and close the mouth. Ask him or her to exhale like if they are trying to blow up a balloon. So what happens in Valsalva maneuver? There will be rise in intrathoracic or intra-abdominal pressure against closed glottis. This decreases the venous return to the heart. Again, this increases the peripheral venous pressure. So, proptosis due to orbital varices increases in size. This is a video demonstrating the increase in the proptosis after Valsalva maneuver. Palpation. Palpate the orbital margin and look for any palpable mass lesion and assess the orbital pressure by retropulsion. Retropulsion can be demonstrated by gently applying pressure over the closed eyelids and pushing the globe into the orbit. Compare the resistance offered by the proptosed eye with that of the normal. From this, you can know if the orbital lesion is compressible or not. While palpating the orbit, ask the patient to look in the direction in which you are palpating so that the orbital septum is relaxed. Use the pulp of a finger to palpate the orbit for any mass. If any mass is palpable, note its consistency, tenderness, extent, surface, reducibility, and its posterior extent also. Auscultation. In pulsatile proptosis, auscultate with the bell of the stethoscope as shown in the picture for any bruit. It is typically heard in high flow fistulas. So this is the examination part, and to complete the evaluation of the proptosis we need to see the investigations also. So like CT, MRI and histopathology come to our aid to make a very accurate diagnosis, which goes a long way in managing the case. Thank you.